So we're all here tonight because we care about defending and protecting human rights. And here to discuss how human rights has affected him is our new mayor, Mr. Amarjeet Sohi. Your worship.
Well, thank you, Kim. It's nice to see everyone. I know I wish we were meeting in person, but unfortunately, we are still living through COVID and unable to get together. But I do look forward to engaging with you more in depth when we have the opportunity to meet each other. But I do want to start first of all by acknowledging that I speak with you, even though virtually, but speak with you from the Treaty 6 territory. And that land acknowledgement is deeply personal for me because I came to this land from somewhere else and started my life from right at the bottom and with nothing, but with the support of the community, the generosity of this community, and the spirit of Indigenous peoples that allow newcomers to be welcomed to this place is something that I deeply appreciate and that I show my gratitude and my appreciation for the ability for me to be on this land. I came to Canada when I was 18 years old. I landed on November 21st, 1981 at the Edmonton International Airport. It was the coldest day. And I can tell you, I thought that that will be the coldest I will ever feel in my life. Well, boy, oh boy, I was ever wrong. Because every day after that was even more coldest from my perspective, because I never felt that cold in my life before. So, but it was a journey of struggle, a journey of hopes and dreams, a journey of ability to build a new life in a new country. But I struggled a lot because I could not speak English at all, and I had very little understanding and knowledge of the Canadian way of life. The only support I had was the love and support of my brother and my sister-in-law, who were so generous for me to be living with them and offering their space and the support. Right. So, but because of those language barriers, I struggled a lot and faced a lot of bullying in school, racism because of the way I looked. And the skin color and the difference that we weren't celebrating as much as we do now. I'm talking about early 80s in Edmonton. But this is a place, Edmonton is a place that lifted me up. It lifted me up by offering the support that is so necessary for ordinary people to build their capacity and be fully participating members of the community. So how did Edmonton build my capacity to be successful? A working class person, an immigrant coming from somewhere else with very little skill, with very little knowledge. What built my capacity was the services that city offers. From public transit that I took to go to work, to go to school, to find a better job, to the libraries where I could go, study, read more about Canadian history, read about other people's life stories and be inspired by them, or the rec centers and the playgrounds where I played soccer with friends. That's where I met people that have become long-lasting friends of mine, right? So I think those public infrastructure and public amenities shaped my life as they do shape the life of many, many ordinary people. So when you invest in the capacity of the ordinary people, we end up doing extraordinary work. And I'm a very good example of that. Right? So I carried on with my life. I started working with a theater group. to build more connections in the community. Uh, Through that theater group, I got involved in social justice movement. I got to learn more about Indigenous history, Indigenous culture, and the colonization of Canada and the colonization of other cultures. Got involved in international organizations that were working and doing some work in Latin American countries, supporting democracy and human rights and social justice. And I got involved in a local uh, film festival, bringing filmmakers from around the world to highlight the struggles of activists. And that was my introduction to the social justice scene in Edmonton. What I really valued, the connection that was able to build, that I found to reflect my own struggles through the struggles of other people. The things that I was going through, the things I was struggling, a lot of other people were struggling the same things, whether they were struggling here, whether they were struggling in the international community. Because of my involvement in theater, uh, I I wanted to learn that craft more, the street form of theater, and use that as a social justice tool, as a social justice vehicle to talk about social issues. So I decided to move to India uh, in 1988, early 1988, to work with a playwright who was very prominent playwright and dramatist in India, who successfully deployed that technique of going from village to village to village, engaging with the people and expressing their desires through theater and building a social justice movement. So I started learning more about that, and I ended up in a small village in Bihar, northern India, and where I was arrested for being part of that group and also helping organize farmers to be part of the land reform that were so much necessary. Because when you think about central India, it is still a very feudal society, very heavy with landlords controlling all the land and the peasants working those lands, even though they're entitled to that land, but never held that title in their name. So there's a big reform movement taking place, and theater was part of the reform movement. So I was arrested for being part of the movement. At the same time, in India, there was a sectarian uh, 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 movements going around different parts of the of the country, and the central government really used people's different views and religions to divide communities. And because I was a Sikh of faith, my faith is Sikh. I don't practice the faith the way many baptized Sikhs do, but I deeply believe in the values of Sikhism, and I follow those values. Because of my faith, I was associated with by the authorities with a terrorist group, calling me a terrorist, saying this person from this faith, being in this place, being part of this movement, they made the assumption that I would be a terrorist. At that time, India had a rule, a very draconian legislation passed that allowed state to hold people in custody for 2 years with or without any charges being laid or without any justification to be provided to the court system. It was called Terrorist and Destructive Activities Act. It remained in effect till I think 1995. Eventually, it was repealed. So I was kept in prison uh, under that provision of the Justice Act that did not afford me any opportunity to be in front of justice, a judge, or afford me the ability to make my plea and my case. Right. So But there was a big movement built around my arrest. A lot of social justice organizations got involved. A lot of international organizations got involved, including Amnesty International. And I can tell you, I was so impressed with the the letters. Now that I think about them, hundreds and hundreds of letters that I got from around the world, generated by Amnesty International's international advocacy to have me released from prison. And number of lawyers came together in my defense, so they built their case. Um, and I finally got access to media for a number of months, almost for 4 months. My family did not know my whereabouts, and I had no access to the outside world. And for 18 months, I was kept under solitary confinement. But uh, I think about a year into my imprisonment, because I didn't have access to any outside world or libraries or books or newspapers and in media, I went on a hunger strike. And that word leaked to the media that I was on a hunger strike, and that really put a lot of pressure on the government to. And my requests were very simple. I wasn't asking to be released because that was something that would have gone through the court system. I was just demanding dignity. I was demanding better food. I was demanding better treatment. I was demanding access to the library that existed in the prison. I was demanding access to the newspaper so I could read and actually stay a little bit connected uh, to the to the outside world. And through that, it further allowed organizations like Amnesty to build their case for my release. And after 21 months, I was let go. I was all the charges were withdrawn, and I was released uh, with the acknowledgement that it was a wrongful imprisonment, or that my arrest was not in the public interest. Uh, and then I came back to Canada in end of 1990. Then started working at the city with DATS, Disabled Adults Transportation, that is public transit as a bus driver. And there I started organizing for the drivers because we all were working conditions were very poor. Again, coming back to the social justice roots, and got involved back in the theater, got involved in other cultural organizations, and start building my connections into the community. And through that work, I was introduced to some city council members, the important role that city councilors play in advancing democracy, in advancing justice, and moving our city forward. And I eventually ran for city council in 2004, which I lost, but I never looked back because I really wanted to make a difference. I really felt passionate about what I went through, the experience I had, that no one else should have those bad experiences. At the same time, the opportunities I had, that everyone should have those opportunities. So that has been my driving force. That has been my driving passion, building an Edmonton for all of us, where we feel we belong, where we feel that our voices matter, where we feel that we have a connection to the community, where we as a community lift each other up, not hold people down. And that is what I have been doing ever since during my time on city council, as well as my time as a member of parliament, as a minister now in my capacity as your mayor. So that's my brief journey, Kim. In a nutshell, look forward to engaging with Q&A with the members who are participating. But this is my also opportunity to thank Amnesty International and the people who were involved in that organization at that time, the contribution they made to help me get out of the prison, and along with many other people who were involved. I deeply appreciate that because without the support and the work and the advocacy of many organizations, I don't know if I would been out. Right. So it's deep personal appreciation from the bottom of my heart for all those who've been part of Amnesty and all those who have been supporting this wonderful organization.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sohi. It's really an honor to hear from you, and we really thank you for taking a moment to be a little bit vulnerable and share your story this way. I think it's important for all of us to examine our personal connection to why we're doing this work, and hearing your words is very gratifying and very wonderful for all of us to hear. I do have a few questions that have come through from a few people.
Yeah.
One question is, when you were in prison, how did you stay positive? How did you not become sort of overcome by anger in that situation?
You know, I had to come to terms with my reality during those days. And one way to stay positive was to be looking for connection to the people, or trying to build that connection to the people who showed me compassion at the most difficult time of my life. And I did find, this may surprise many of you to hear, but I did find compassion in prison. Compassion from those who, if they're ordered to do brutal things, they would do those brutal things to you. But at a personal level, when they're there as a human being, you get to know their stories, you get to know their vulnerabilities, and you get to know deep power of humanity when you look for that humanity. So I remember the prison guard who took the risk to release the letter that I wrote before going on hunger strike. Right? That guard could have easily lost his job or be disciplined had he been found out, right, that he released my letter. Otherwise, how would I get my word out, right?
Mm-hmm.
That guard had no relations with me, but he felt empathetic. He felt that what was happening was wrong. So his compassion helped me to get my word out. So those kind of compassionate moments kept me hopeful. And also, once I got access to the newspapers, I was reading stories of people demanding justice for me. Who would have imagined that members of Amnesty International throughout the world would be sending me cards or encouraging me to stay strong, sending that message of love and care that they're fighting for me, right? I think that kept me going, and that faith in the humanity and the faith in people's ability to be compassionate and caring for each other.
Wonderful. Thank you. I have another question for you. How do you see local grassroots movements connected to global movements? How do you see those two things connecting?
No, we live in a globalized world now, right? Everything that happens in a local place has a huge impact throughout the country, throughout the world. Look at the occupation of Ukraine by Russia. Right? It's a conflict far, far, far away from us, but it has real life consequences for the people who have family members in Ukraine, who have community connections to Ukraine, but beyond that is impacting our lives every day in higher cost for living, right? Or many other ways, or even the ability for someone to abuse their power and dominate another people or another nation or occupy another people and another nation, if not stopped and goes unchallenged, gives license for local authoritarian tendencies to raise their head. Right? I think that's why it's so important that local grassroots organizations see their role and find connection. That's what I did when I got involved in the Global Vision Festival here in Edmonton as a volunteer. We would bring in filmmakers from around the world to tell the stories of their struggle, aspirations, and what they were fighting for, and trying to find local connections here in the community.
Thank you so much again. I have a few more questions that are rolling in. Let me see. What role do you think municipal governments have in protecting and enforcing human rights?
Oh, we have a significant role to play, even though the from a legal point of view, from a jurisdictional point of view, human rights issues, legislations may not be the purview, or we may not have the legislative authority on that. But we are the closest government to people. And we are expected to be the champions of local people. So the role we have, not only to protect human rights through our own actions and bylaws, for example, whenever we pass a bylaw or pass a policy, do we apply equity lens to that policy? That equity lens is about human rights. When we're building infrastructure, are we designing and building that infrastructure that is inclusive of people with disabilities or people using mobility aids to access amenities and services? So that's one example. Are our programs and services equally available to all Edmontonians, regardless of their status, regardless of their color, regardless of their orientation, regardless of their abilities, regardless of their income, or ability to pay, right? I think that's another very important, which is basic human rights. Housing is another good example, right? Making sure that municipality is doing what it can to have affordable, appropriate, accessible housing available for all Edmontonians. So it's absolutely at a local level on a daily basis, I would say, meeting the daily needs of Edmontonians from a human rights perspective, from an equity perspective. There's a big role that municipalities play.
Thank you so much. I have more questions rolling in as we talk here. So I'm going to share a question from Rob. What was the nature of the plays that you put on as you and your group traveled around India? Did they have a social justice theme? And is this what concerned the environment, or what made the government feel threatened?
So most of the work that was being done by the artists in India at that time really related to land reforms. They were really pushing hard that the ownership of land should be tied to those who actually till it, who work on it, instead of an absentee landlord who may not even be living in the close proximity, but they happen to have control of vast territory of land that never belonged to them, right? But by force, they took control. So that was mainly the work they were doing. They were also doing a lot of work on breaking down caste barriers, because India, particularly that part of India, is pretty polarized based on caste system, which is a form of racism that we see here based on skin color. And they also were involved quite a bit in advancing women's rights and the rights of indigenous communities as well in India. So that's why government and authorities really, I would say, more authorities are on not government authorities, but authorities who hold the power through their financial means were really worried about that movement taking place and questioning the status and the privilege that certain segments of the population enjoyed. But here in Edmonton, we focused on experiences of newcomers, immigrants. We focused on the history of the Indo-Canadian community, because Indo-Canadian community, not many people know, has almost more than 100-year long history in this country. People from my community started arriving here in 1897. And there was a lot of discrimination against the community, including the turning away of 375 people boarded a ship who came on the shores of Vancouver, but never were allowed to land, then were forced back. So they spent almost 2 months in the waters, struggling to navigate their daily lives and lack of access to food and sanitation. And when they went back to India, they were perceived to be anti-government and perceived to be part of anti-British government and part of overthrowing colonial rule. So many of them were arrested, and many of them were killed. And so there's a very long history of oppression and people fighting for social justice. So we try to highlight that through our plays, through our group. Another interesting aspect that the Indo-Canadian community, when they started arriving here, Canada was part of the British Empire, so was India. So when they arrived here, they had the right to vote. But in 1908, by legislation, Canadian government took that right to vote away from the community. And it took until 1947, a long struggle by the community to gain the right back. So we highlighted those struggles to inspire young people or be inspired by their history. We inspired by their history to talk about their struggle and rich history of resistance here.
Wow, that's very interesting. It feels like there's some connection between the theater group in India and the push for land rights by Indigenous folks in Canada right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have another question from Catherine. She says, Mr. Mayor, I'm concerned about how we can put more effort to prevent workplace discrimination in Edmonton.
Yeah, I lived through the reality, and that's one of the reasons I became a union organizer, because I was working at DATS, and our working conditions were pretty horrible. We were working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, without any overtime, without any protection for illness, for healthcare, or stat pay, or sick leave, or even if we were unable to show up for work because of illness, we had to find our own replacement to come to work. And if we didn't, we were disciplined, and that discipline was so severe that it led to termination for a number of our colleagues. And because of my involvement in the social justice movement, my colleagues looked up to me to start organizing them, so which I did. So I absolutely understand the need for social justice and the protection of rights at workplace. That's something I'm very, very passionate about. That's why we need to have better health regulation, better safety regulations, better pay for workers, better benefits for workers, and the respect for the rules and regulations, and the promotion of diversity within workforce, diversity of every type. I'm not just talking about cultural diversity. I'm talking about, you know, gender diversity. I'm talking about people from, lived experiences that are different from other people. I'm talking about people who are facing disabilities. Are they being reflected in the workforce, right? And so that's the work that we are trying to lead at City, and I hope we are making a difference.
Thank you so much. I have another question from John. He says, thank you so much for speaking with our group and talking about your personal story. My question is a local human rights question about council's recent decision to close the washrooms on public transit. I've heard a lot of concerns about this, especially for people who are experiencing homelessness or in vulnerable situations, as well as people with disabilities. Would you be able to talk a bit about the rationale behind this?
Absolutely. That was, I would say, a very difficult decision for our administration and council to support, because what we were experiencing, that over 2021, the number of calls at LRT stations related to people using drugs, or people staying at LRT stations because they have no place to stay, and the number of medical incidents happening at LRT stations and washrooms has skyrocketed. So keeping washrooms open was actually doing more harm to homeless people than it was actually helping them. So here's the challenge we have, which I'm really concerned about and doing what I can and understand to have a better grip on this problem. We have a number of Edmontonians who are our fellow citizens who experience houselessness. They experience houselessness because of mental health issues, the trauma they have lived through their lives, or their parents or their grandparents lived through life in case of indigenous communities, and the addictions crisis, the opioid crisis that we're facing in our city. In order to help those people heal, we don't have enough support systems in place. We don't have enough affordable housing. We don't have enough supportive housing. We don't have enough shelters. We don't have enough treatment facilities. We don't have enough harm reduction facilities. And we have no access to safe supply of pharmaceutical choices for people to use. So they end up using what they get their hands on. But the fact is that people want to live. When they are injecting something, if they don't have a safe space to do so, they're coming to LRT stations to do that because they know that somebody will see them if they're passing out. So that's the crisis we're facing in our public places like LRT stations. It's a plea for help. It's a plea for asking our provincial government to step up, to live up to the responsibility of helping people get better, because addictions services, mental health services, ending houselessness, and providing supportive housing are provincial responsibilities, not municipal responsibilities. But we are facing the brunt of that crisis. And that crisis is hurting our people. And they're ending up in situations where they're dying, and they were dying in washrooms. And washroom is not a safe consumption site because there's nobody to watch. The way our washrooms are designed, you press the button to go in, and somebody sitting miles away in a control center will open their washroom, and that person is responsible for a number of other things. They can't see inside of the washroom, so they may not even notice whether you have gone out or not gone out, right? So it's a very difficult situation. That's why we ended up closing those washrooms. At the same time, investing more in social workers to connect people to services. But unfortunately, those services are not available for a lot of Edmontonians.
Thank you so much. I have two more questions for you. I hope we have time to fit them in. One question is, as Edmonton receives more refugees and other newcomers to Canada, what is the city doing and what can individuals do to support their transition here?
So I'll start with what city can and should do and is doing. First of all, we whenever we are receiving a large number of refugees, in the case of Syrian refugees and now Ukrainian refugees, we activate our emergency response management system to coordinate all the program and services to help people integrate into the community. So that's a very good service that we provide. And also we provide affordable transportation to Edmontonians because our transit system is subsidized. We also provide low-cost access to recreational facilities. Our libraries are free for people to use, which is great, right? But that's kind of at a service level. All the services that are available to Edmontonians are available to refugees and newcomers, right? Another thing that we need to do more is actually we need to build a culture of embracing each other, right? Not just a culture of acceptance. Acceptance is more about, I don't like you, but it's okay you're here, right? Embracing is more about welcoming people. Say, look, come, you are part of this society, you're part of this community, we embrace you, we welcome you to this place. And we do that by ending racism and discrimination in our city. So a lot of my focus has been putting policies together and supporting cultural organizations to Edmonton to be truly an anti-racist city, a place for all of us, regardless of whether you came here yesterday or whether you were born here or you are part of indigenous communities who've been here for centuries and centuries, right? So building Edmonton for all of us. I think that's a very important work that we are undertaking to welcome refugees and newcomers. As a community, extend your friendship to newcomers. I was at the Nowruz celebration a couple of weeks ago, which is a celebration of Persian culture, and I had a chance to meet with a number of new immigrants and refugees from Afghanistan. Right? They were just ecstatic to see their mayor come join them, right? And just imagine if all of us are reaching out to newcomers and extending that hand of friendship and be with them when they need us, right? At a community level. I wish that the people who harassed me in school, if there were other people standing with me when I was being bullied, right? I think that the sense of community and the sense of supporting each other is a lot we can
do. The last question that I have for you is kind of a tag on to this question. It's just simply, how can citizens be a part of promoting and protecting human rights? From cases like the attacks on Muslim women in our city to what you're suggesting here about reaching out in friendship to newcomers. Can you recommend any organizations? Can you recommend anything a little bit concrete that, that people can offer, and how can they participate in making our city better?
So there are a number of organizations that are doing human rights work and anti-racism work, inclusion work in our city. You're one of them, right? We have Pantero Healing Society, for example. We have Center for Race and Culture. We have John Humphrey Center. We have our own anti-racism committee. We have uh, uh, community-led organizations like Africa Center or Sisters Dialogue or organizations that support LGBTQ 2+ communities, right? So there's a lot of organizations that you can be part of and support them if you can financially, but also by volunteering with them or just promoting them. But beyond that, just as a citizen, as a resident of your neighborhood, just getting to know your neighbors, just spending time out in the public places and greeting each other, particularly somebody's new moving into your neighborhood, right? So just being there, there's a lot of things we can do to build that cohesive community, that welcoming place for all of us.
Thank you so much again, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much for joining us. I think that's all. I think we managed to get through all the questions and we're right on schedule for you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I see some familiar faces in the people who are joining us. I haven't seen them in person, but look forward to seeing you in person. And thank you for having me. And thank you for all the work that you have been doing and continue to do.
Come back.
It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. And I hope you enjoyed our chat with the mayor. And please stay in touch with Amnesty Edmonton. If you're not already a member, we'd love to hear from you. Have a great night, everyone.